So thank you very much for allowing me to present our case here. I would like to present as a company introducing biochar into the overall business activities here in Vietnam and give a short introduction to Vietnam and why Vietnam, or as a representation for Southeast Asia in general, maybe. We are, as a consultant, providing services to our clients, mainly focusing on greenhouse gas inventory, carbon footprint calculations, training and workshops. Also, decarbonization is a buzzword now here in Vietnam as a manufacturing hub, also becoming more important in relation to China for the world. So more and more international companies are investing in Vietnam, and therefore the exposure and awareness of decarbonization, environmental issues, ESG reporting is further increasing, and that's where we see our main activities, which I would just like to highlight to show our background and where we are going with. So what we are doing in our consultancy work is greenhouse gas emissions inventory, basically telling our client how bad it is and supporting them into doing more sustainable business and helping them in, especially also in supply chains, and complying with their headquarters or their overseas companies' strategy to net zero or carbon neutrality. We are doing technical training on these aspects, as well as environmental awareness workshops, where we are supporting the companies in themselves, as well as the local employees, to raise awareness about energy efficiency, single-use plastic, as well as a low carbon lifestyle. This is something we are giving to the community as well in terms of awareness for the environment, which I think you have maybe seen in the news, that especially Southeast Asia and other parts of the world, there's a lack of awareness of these kind of issues. However, what I would like to talk more about is especially our core or biochar projects, where we, as you probably know, turn organic waste or byproducts using pyrolysis or gasification into biochar, and apply the biochar in different applications like terra preta, water filtration, animal bedding, or carbon concrete. Those different ways how to apply the biochar and use it in a beneficial way. Providing revenue streams, but what we have in mind is actually not our own revenue, but is community development, which I will introduce a bit further. So why are we in Vietnam, where we have a huge amount of agriculture waste and byproducts, more than 90 million tons of different residues from cropping. We have a lot of animal husbandry as well as forestry. Vietnam is one of the larger agricultural products producers in Southeast Asia, together with, of course, with other countries like Indonesia or Malaysia, Thailand, and where we have a lot of rice husk, for example, but also rice straw, but also smaller areas, amounts, coconut shells or coffee husks, which Vietnam is probably more famous for. However, we have the issue that only half, a bit more than half of it is actually used in animal feed, soft bedding, organic fertilizer, or used as a fuel, burning those for cooking, or just and the rest is not used. It's just burning on the fields, and then the ashes are spread around on the fields, creating a lot of problems for the nearby residents. We have issues with site problems with airplanes that cannot land anymore. So there's a lot of issues. In order to solve them, we are proposing quite a number of different concepts, mainly focusing on missing or lack of infrastructure in some areas of Vietnam. If you go to the bigger cities already, let's say well developed in some parts of it, but then in other areas we are still lacking infrastructure, especially for wastewater and water. So the idea was to combine the production of biochar as well as the cleaning of wastewater using the biochar, and also reusing the treated wastewater to grow another feedstock like bamboo or something to create even more biochar. We have adapted the whole concept for coffee, and we call it Coffee for Climate, where we are using the heat waste heat either for drying or for the roasting of coffee beans with different kind of technologies we have identified here in Vietnam from suppliers we are collaborating with from small scale, but also into industrial scale. Usually they are supported by Europeans or overseas, let's say organizations, UNDP or others, USAID as well, supporting these kind of activities in order to develop a market for these kind of technology and also sustainable approach. So that's where we go with our concepts. So what did we do so far? We have been working with MCNV, a Dutch NGO in central Vietnam in Quang Tri. They have developed a project for FSC certification of community forest as well as acacia forest, which is also one of the major exports in terms of furniture, producing acacia wood and producing furniture from them and exporting them. So we have been employed, or we have collaborating with MCNV together on a compensation project where we have been funded by a German company, ATB, to compensate 10 tons, equivalent of 10 tons of CO2 turn it into biochar. And then now we are going into the second phase, applying the biochar into soils. And that's why I think, Christine, it was very interesting to hear about your presentation as well, because that's where we're going very soon for the Vietnamese soils. We need to do some more research as well, I see. So this is what we're doing. We're helping the community to diversify the revenue stream because at the moment we are in the highlands. We are working with minorities, very limited access to financial aid, to financial benefits they can get from their crop. The yields are usually going down because they cannot afford fertilizer, or they may have bought fertilizer in the past and cannot pay back, and now sitting on the debt and need to pay that without any really good possibilities to earn money. So we are providing funding for them to buy the biochar and apply the biochar in the nearby community to increase the yields for agriculture. This, as just as a background, as I said, we do the calculation for our clients, and then usually the clients understand their impact on the environment. Of course, they then themselves, or investors, regulators, customers, expect them to reduce their carbon footprint. And so that's why there's an increase also here in Vietnam to give back to the community. So we as a company provide these kind of compensation projects. And I would like to introduce a few more where we are working on. One is then, of course, where we already have our partners, MCNV in Quang Tri, where we want to introduce also on the household level the use of biochar. I think maybe some are aware in terms of carbon credits. There are quite a number of cook stove projects in Africa, but also in Southeast Asia, as well as in Vietnam. Which have maybe not the best reputation or not the best impact. So we would like to use this technology in producing biochar and using the gasifier to cook. There's a number of technology available for small households that they can cook their own meals, and then at the end they have biochar, which they can then use again on their agricultural land. The same as I mentioned, they have FSC certification for the forestry management as well as for the biodiversity in that area. And we want to further support the idea of sustainable forest management. And therefore, we are also implementing soon a project, hopefully, for the biochar production from these sustainable managed forests. As I mentioned, we have a concept for coffee for climate, and here we're working with the coffee plantation Kanai in Lam Dong. In that area, maybe Dalat is a more famous name as a tourist attraction. In that area, also we are in the highlands working with minorities, and hopefully then can implement a project very soon, also turning waste from coffee plantations from the coffee husks into biochar and can return it to the plantation as well as the nearby farmers. Another project which we will start very soon in Sogjiang province is circular economy, where we are combining biochar as well as composting, black soldier flies into a circular economy project together with a partner locally, and also want to improve the living standards and lives of the community on a larger island. Also reducing the atmospheric CO2 levels in general. Besides coffee, cocoa production is also a bigger topic here in Vietnam. So there are quite a number of premium cocoa producers, and they are also more taking the responsibility for the sustainable produced cocoa. And therefore, now we are shifting for coffee as well as then for cocoa production from rather monoculture into agroforestry. Big brands like Nestle already also moving into that direction. And we are also supporting this tendency and developing some concepts to apply the production of biochar into those communities as well. However, it's always good as a consultant to talk good and to be better, maybe. We are also developed quite a number of products. So in order to show and demonstrate that what we are doing and talking about is also working and is a benefit for the community as well as for the investors in these kind of projects, can see the benefit directly from us. So that's why we have our own biochar production currently under support from another producer in Thanh Hoa in the north, also FSC certified material we are using, bamboo, because it has a lot of, it's fast growing, sequestration of CO2 is very quickly, and therefore it's not, is a sustainable way and very quick way to capture CO2 and then turn it into biochar and apply the biochar. So one of the two products we already have developed and you can buy on Shopee, which is basically Vietnam's Amazon, is biochar soap as well as air freshener, where we are targeting rather the younger generation, the generation very interested in sustainability and environmentally friendly packaging and all these aspects we are including already. And another thing, a milestone from our side, is that we have now set up a facility where we are processing our own biochar into fine powder. Because for us, we are now looking into the production, and probably next month I will be able to sell you some flower pots. So this is carbon concrete, where we're looking into low carbon, carbon neutral flower pots with our own capabilities to calculate the carbon footprint of products and set up a greenhouse gas inventory. We are now calculating the production CO2 generated by the production, and we will capture the same or use the same amount of carbon inside of the biochar and mix it and produce these kind of interesting, very modern looking flower pots. And hopefully I will be able to sell this very soon on the market as one of the examples how to turn the biochar into a product and sell them on the market. Just to explain here the contact details as well, and we are a foreign direct invested company in Vietnam with a headquarter in Germany. However, all the operations is here. We have a LinkedIn where you can find more information and support us on our community development, because only if you want to go fast, you go alone, but we want to go far, so we go together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Markus, for the presentation. Very interesting. Also, what's going on in Vietnam, and yeah, as a lot of projects actually, so quite impressive. My first question would be: these are usually financed financed by larger corporations in the Western world, or how do you finance these?
Smaller. It's because the problem in Vietnam is first of all, many companies look at cheap carbon credits, which these kind of projects will not produce and generate cheap carbon credits. The other thing is that we are dealing with rather smaller farmers, so the entities are rather small. So that's why it's very difficult and tricky to get long-term contracts and larger amounts of carbon to sequestrate and then to turn into biochar, because for the biochar to generate carbon credits, we need to apply it in a way that is permanent, talking about the permanence. And that's quite challenging, I would say, in Vietnam to ensure that the biochar applied will also be of permanence, because the government can always step in and change the planning of certain locations in a way, and therefore we need to make sure that areas and land right use is ensured to provide this kind of permanency.
Okay. So I will change the questions from the chat. So Judy Payne was asking, is the residue used for animal feed or the biochar itself? That was at the beginning of your presentation. So you know what?
I think this one. So
Yes.
so some of the is directly used for animal feed. It depends on. I mean, this is just some examples here. So we have quite a number of different materials as a residue, and some of it, of course, is suitable as a animal feed. But just as an example, where we are working with the project in Sokjang, that concept includes also the production of biochar and mixing the biochar with the soft bedding, which will reduce the odor and will also avoid any flies. So it will be more hygienic in a way. And then the soft bedding can be then taken out on the field, because it then will be charged with organic material. And the pigs, they will also feed off or will eat some of the soft bedding together with the biochar. And therefore there's the potential also to include the biochar into the animal feed as well. So both animal feed as well as soft bedding. That's part of the concept.
Kamal Deep was asking, how do you manage logistics transportation of rice straw husks, as it is a very low density biomass? Have you considered using aggregation into pellets and performing pyrolysis at a centralized location, or do you do that decentralized in smaller units?
So I presented the case. Mainly what we are using is bamboo biochar, because it has a higher density and it's better in terms of economics to transport. For the rice husks, we are actually not using these in our projects, because of these issues. And in terms of greenhouse gas, or the calculation of the carbon emissions, we don't want to transport things too far. Especially there's the 200 kilometer boundary, where we then beyond that we need to calculate the transport. So what we are doing with our projects is always very nearby. If there's a long transport, it's too much. It's not really working to make it more, because then you need to have trucks, you need to have people, you need to have the diesel, and then so the whole thing will first of all, economically gets a bit more tricky, as well as it's not our intention. So we want to have a circular economy in a very small area.
Okay.
That's the focus.
So we are jumping a bit topics here because the questions came all over the place. So John Hoffmeyer was asking, I saw the image of the air freshener.
Yeah.
How is the biochar regenerated when it becomes fully loaded with odorants, or do you just apply it to soil after it's full?
Yeah, so we give the recommendation that you expose it to sunshine for a few hours, which is very easy here in Vietnam, and should recharge. And then, as I said, if you don't want to use it anymore, that's I think you hinted already. We recommend to mix it and use it into the soil in your garden or in your potted plants. So in order not to burn it, but to recommend to use it as a soil improver as well.
Have you tried, because I was wondering, I came across it a couple of years ago, that there are air fresheners for shoes, Have you used it for that, or is it more as a room air freshener meant to be?
I must admit, I personally haven't used it. From what I hear from my colleagues, it works quite well. What we personally have used the biochar for is our fridge.
Hmm.
After some barbecue, we had some leftover fish, which started to smell, and the fridge was not so fresh anymore. And we put our biochar inside, and since then, our fridge is not. The fish has been removed by now, but there's no odor anymore. And
Okay,
we
but
maintain a small glass of biochar inside our fridge, and it's never smelled anymore like that after that.
I mean that's actually also quite a nice product. uh, uh,
Thinking about it.
Sean Thomas was asking, great, so many projects. Have you developed any research partnerships to formally evaluate in Vietnam or more broadly?
We have approached a number of research institutions. Let's say, as a foreign direct invested company, it's quite difficult to get together with research institutions because they kind of still rely on government funding, and they have their own priorities. And yeah, let's put it that way.
So, ma-
We have approached, and it was unfortunately not successful so far.
so you can try approaching Sean Thomas, but he's sitting in Canada, so might be bit far away. Um, the last question was from Parsan. Very inspiring indeed. How to keep the locals interested and motivated along the way and create market demand? Maybe you can explain a bit how, because that's a common issue with biochar projects.
Yeah, exactly. First of all, it's good if you pay a bit more than the others for the biochar or for these kind of revenue streams, because just to put it frankly, for example, we are not going for rice husk because that's very commonly already used for composting or as an additive as a fertilizer itself, and there is a market for that, and people will sell the rice straw or the rice husks in some areas already. So it really depends very locally on where you are to get people interested. There are some provinces where, for example, coconut shells are commonly used already for biochar production and used in water filtration. Next province has never heard of it and is just discarding coconut shells into the nature and hoping that the next high tide will take it away. So there are really differences in provinces, in locals, areas, and so it's very different from province to province or from larger areas to another area. So it's the motivation, of course, on one side is a lot of monetary, but also education. Because we are suffering here from kind of air pollution as well as water pollution in some areas. So the motivation is also there to improve the environment. But what we see, and that's why our products are a bit looking trendy, is that the younger generation does now understand the issues and is more interested in sustainability, in green, in natural products, and therefore we are targeting these areas. Of course, then it's a kind of a problem because the products are not cheap, and we are targeting maybe students or younger generation, which may not have the funding. But that's why we are trying with our project, and that's what Christine mentioned before. Imagine the biochar is for free. So what we are looking into, and maybe the products here on this will not really apply for carbon compensation, but some of it we can already finance by using the biochar for agriculture, and some of it we still can then take to make some other products, and therefore then could be free of charge. So there are quite a number of things we are trying to maintain a price which is acceptable for customers to make it not too expensive. For example, the biochar soap does not contain a lot of biochar, but it still changes the appearance and provides the story behind. to the customer as well.
Great. So thanks a lot, Markus. I think so. Kamala had a follow-up question, a last question. So rice straw like biomass is not a viable solution in your view at this point.
It would be. At the moment, we are not targeting because of these other reasons. Because there is a market, we would then compete with them, and that's a competition you only drive through the price. And so at the end, you will lose, and therefore we are not interested in going there. It might be in some of the project, it might be even reasonable for, let's say, in Sokchang, where we are now building up the process, that there's potential for rice husk, but at the moment is not, because it also burns so quickly. So the heat recovery is not enough, or is not the best feedstock for the projects.
And you got one last question.
Okay.
So for carbon credits, is the biochar itself sufficient to attract those credits, or do the various steps in the production processes play a significant role? Maybe you can just quickly explain where
Quickly, yeah.
is.
I try to keep it short.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There are different standards for the carbon credits, which then depends on the technology, temperature, feedstock, and therefore it also impacts the project price or the project cost, and therefore then also the asking price for the carbon credits. And it's only the application which will generate the carbon credit, not the production of biochar. So that's the difficult part.